India is an unequal country. We do rank fourth in having the most number of billionaires in one country. But at the same time, do you know that it would take 941 years for a minimum wage worker in rural India to earn as much as a top paid executive in a garment company? In 2017, India's top 1% richest people had 73% wealth of India. And in 1 year, the wealth of the said 1% people had increased from 20 lakh crores, which was equal to the budget of India in the year. But this inequality worsens every year. As you can see that in 2016, the top 1% richest people had only 58% wealth of India and 16 people had an income equal to 600 crores income. According to World Bank, there are 25 crore people in India below the poverty line, which means that they spend less than $2 to rupees 120 a day, which while more than 2 lakh people in India spend less than rupees 100 a day, and the quality of life can be seen in cities like Mumbai and Delhi of these people. Inequality is much higher in India than most major economies. Many economists claim that inequality in India is most likely more than what is officially calculated by the government, which is more than the statistics shown. They use satellite data to tell that inequality in India can be observed from night brightness. In India, before liberalization, between 1950s to 1980, the income share of the top 1% had fallen. This was the socialist area. Before then, the finance minister Manmohan Singh introduced the liberalization reforms. So now, the first thing that comes to mind is since the income share of the top 1% had dropped, obviously the working class had it better during the socialist era before the liberalization. But it's quite not the case. According to Indian economist Swaminathan Iyer, before liberalization, the poverty ratio didn't fall. At the same time, the population of India doubled, so the number of people had also increased. However, before the growth in the GDP induced by the liberalization, nearly 138 million people were able to raise themselves above the poverty line between 2004 and 2011. Yes, inequality might have increased, but India still fared better because Permit Raj was abolished and Indians had better access to new opportunities and to make something of themselves. Why inequality needs to be solved? See, it creates a division in society and many social groups feel separated. Like you have some cases like on October 2019, one reason behind the Dalit people's protest was inequality. And even in January 2020, the Kisan rally in India.
Is PM Cares really the first time that the public has demanded for some sort of transparency? Just a small flashback to about 9 years ago when Anna Hazare had his famous anti corruption movement. This movement was backed by various politicians and corporates. The whole movement focused on political and legal issues, especially those surrounding political corruption. Coming back to today, we are pretty much falling back into the same pit hole, but this time, politicians and corporates have turned their heads around. Funny enough, in 2019, Anna Hazare himself claimed that parties like BJP and Aam Aadmi Party used him for their very own political agenda. This saga explains our country's state when it comes to corruption. Political parties can receive funds in three different ways. Firstly, through foreign funds. Second, now individuals can anonymously donate to political parties in the form of electoral bonds. And lastly, and the most important one, corporate donations. Interestingly enough, corporate donations now account to 90% of the political donations received by these political parties. Also, the ruling party, that is the BJP, receives a majority of these political donations compared to the other parties. What this does is create an unfair advantage in the political arena. Also, what has fueled the relationships between corporates and political parties is the recent amendments in the 2017 Finance Act, which removed the cap on corporate contributions from 7.5% of the net profit of the previous 3 financial years Also, this Act has now removed the obligation of presenting this in the P&L statement. And lastly, the contributions no more require the consent of the Board of Directors. The whole Act seems like a loophole in the system which can now easily be exploited by both the political parties and the corporate. It is true that all the funds received by political parties aren't entirely hoarded by politicians, and most of it does go into the development of the infrastructure around us. But here comes the philosophy of Louis Althusser. The state for Althusser is the kind of a government formation that arises with capitalism. A state is determined by the capitalist mode of production and formed to protect its own interests. This is exactly what happens when such a relationship is formed. On one hand, where corporates are rising in India and their illegal activities are being supported by the government, we also see how the labor class is affected because of these capitalistic motives.
One of the main reasons for low level of income of people is unemployment. People need jobs to earn money. A huge population depends on the government for providing jobs, but is government really giving jobs as they promise to? A situation was seen in Jammu and Kashmir after revoking their special status, which is Section 370, where the center promised at least 50,000 jobs in the next upcoming 3 months. But after 14 months, the promised jobs were not provided, and the Jammu and Kashmir unemployment rate is soaring. One similar promise in the state of Jammu and Kashmir was made by G.C. Murmu, who was the former Lieutenant Governor. On November 2019, he said that they are keenly working on accelerating the recruitment for youths by giving them jobs, around 30 to 40,000 for the youth. These promises were never discussed from there on. These are an examples of fake promises by the government and really makes us wonder, is government really serious about reducing income inequalities? Corporates have their fair share in increasing the income inequalities. I mean, for instance, look at the employee boss wage gap in the Nifty 50 companies. In the majority of the companies, the top paid executive earned more than 100 times the median salary of its permanent employees. According to the new analysis of corporate filings, the top paid executives such as Hero MotoCorp, Infosys, Tech Mahindra, Bajaj Auto earned more than 500 times the median salary of the company's permanent employees for the financial year 2020. According to the new data, Hero MotoCorp reports the highest pay ratio at 752. CEO Pawan Munjal earned 84.59 crores for the financial year 2020, while the median remuneration of the firm's employees during the fiscal year was rupees 11.25 lakhs. Huge gaps in the income of the executives versus the median of permanent employees' income. Income inequalities follow.
Okay, so today I'm going to be talking about what capitalism is and how the capitalism structure actually increases the gap between the rich and the poor. So, what capitalism is basically is an individual who employs multiple people, and these people are completely dependent on that particular individual, and they get into mass production of a particular product, and the profits completely goes to that particular individual, right? So what this creates is one person who is making multiple other people working under him, paying for them, but at the same time they are the people who consume the products. So that is in very brief on how the capitalism structure works. Now, going more into the capitalism structure in India, I think the biggest example I can think of right now is Ambani, the Reliance Industries in general. They have businesses in petroleum fields, they have businesses in mobile communication, networking, retail, groceries. Reliance Industries employ tons and tons of people, and every single person is consumers of their own product. So let's just say I'm a labor and I get paid 10k for working under a particular individual, right? And from that 10k, I am actually spending my money. I'm giving that money back to the same individual by buying their products. So that is how capitalism actually works, and that is one of the ways in which capitalism creates a very, very big gap between the rich and the poor, because basically the poor are in a stable, they're in one particular platform where they cannot go higher from where they are, and the rich just keeps getting higher. And this pandemic clearly showed how the poor got really, really affected by this. And there are cases in India where people, the laborers actually had to walk 700 kilometers, and people have died on railroads. The rich are basically becoming richer by taking the money from the poor people. And another big, big example, this is more of a scam, but another big example is the Sahara. So how Sahara company actually had chit funds and took money from the most poorest sector of the Indian society and built his empire from scratch. And such kind of a business or such kind of a thing can only happen in a city, in a country like India, because there's also a lot of socialism, because corruption, like I said, in the socialist economy, the corruption is at the highest. And like Karl Marx rightly said, socialism and capitalism actually go hand in hand very, very well together.
It has been said time and again that the GDP doesn't give us an entire image of our country. Capitalism certainly boosts our economy and GDP in numbers, but we ignore the bigger picture here of social welfare. On one hand, we have corporates funding infrastructural development, and on the other, we need to question that are they giving us enough? We are amidst tax scandals and capitalistic motives which only increase the gap between the rich and the poor. Certain reforms need to be brought in which actually help the society at large.